Our story kicks off with the ultimate medieval remodeling, the demolition of Ragnar's legendary castle, the Rose Palace. And by demolition, I mean unknown assailants are running through the halls, cutting down anyone with a pulse, servants, guards, knights, you name it. It's like the world's worst game of hide-and-seek, with Theo Ragnar as our unlucky hero, somehow managing to stay upright and swing his sword at one of the attackers. Theo, bless his heart, gives it his best. He forces his opponent back with an impressive, maybe slightly awkward sword swing that looks like he learned it from one of those how-to-sword-fight scrolls on medieval TikTok. But his opponent's not fazed. He raises his sword, brings it down hard, and Theo barely blocks it in time. This guy is serious. Now, a little backstory on Theo's family, the Ragnar clan. Imagine a family so epic. They've been guarding the Empire's northern border for a millennium. They're the Great Northern Wall, but with fewer bricks and more dragons in the family tree. Every Ragnar is born a magic-wielding, sword-swinging, all-around unstoppable machine. Well, every Ragnar except Theo. He missed that talent memo entirely. Poor guy's as magical as a sack of potatoes. Anyway, in the heat of battle, Theo gets stabbed in the stomach, and down he goes. His opponent, clearly gloating, leans in and sneers. Even at the end, you still don't get it, do you? Apparently, Theo missed the memo about talent again. No matter what you do, the guy taunts, you just don't have it. And then, the twist of the night, Theo's attacker unmasks himself. It's Rendon. Yep, Theo's very own sword instructor. The I believe in you guy. Theo, understandably shook, asks Rendon why he's doing this. Rendon? Oh, he's loving every second. He sneers, saying it was comedy gold watching Theo try every morning. You, he says, barely containing his laughter. Trying to make something of yourself? That was the highlight of my day. Theo, practically vibrating with rage now, demands to know if Rendon only became his teacher to pull off this grand betrayal. Rendon, true to form, casually slashes Theo's arm, sighs like Theo's really the one inconveniencing him here, and goes, "Why are you so dramatic? This mess? It's all you, buddy." He grabs Theo by the hair, giving him the look at what you've done speech, straight out of a disappointed parent's handbook. As Theo's vision starts to blur, Rendon gives him the ultimate guilt trip, asking him to face why Rose Palace is burning, why his family is in ruin. And just when you think Rendon's done, another guy drags a lifeless woman over, tossing her at Theo's feet. "Look at your mother, Theo," Rendon sneers. "Didn't you see this coming?" Theo is beyond horrified as he stares down at his mother, cold and lifeless before him. And Rendon? He's just twisting the knife deeper, literally and figuratively, reminding Theo that he's the weakest of the Ragnar clan. The Ragnar motto might as well be survival of the fittest, but poor Theo somehow missed that memo, and Rendon's having a field day with it. With all the strength he has left, Theo whispers Rendon's name in a mix of fury and disbelief, grabs the nearest sword, and swings with a vengeance, only to be stopped in his tracks as another sword comes flying out of nowhere and stabs him in the chest. Ouch! Down he goes, and his blood is pooling beneath him like some tragic scene from a melodrama. As Theo lies there, feeling about as useful as a wet paper towel, Rendon's psychic tells him off for talking too much and orders him to finish Theo off. Rendon shrugs like this is just another day at the office and goes, all right, just reliving some memories here. I'm almost done. Theo, on the ground and bleeding out, thinks, done? Really? As the palace goes up in flames around him, regret crashes down. He realizes, maybe a little late, that he couldn't protect his soul, least of all himself. All he can think as he closes his eyes in defeat is, man, if only I'd had a shred of talent. But just when it seems like curtains for Theo, he suddenly sees a system message flash in front of him. You have died. Your trait has activated. Returning to the regression point. Confused, he opens his eyes and finds himself staring at Rendon. Again, in one piece. As Rendon, cool as ever, remarks, you look a little worn out. Let's call it a day, shall we? Theo's jaw drops. Did he really die? Was that nightmare even real? Or worse, was Rendon still in his life? Even in death? Rendon eyes him, noticing his silence, and says, what's with you? You look like you've seen a ghost. Theo can't shake the feeling. This feels real, yet completely absurd. Just then, a system message pops up in front of him again. Tutorial quest number 1. punch Rendon in the face. Theo stares, torn between utter shock and a sudden, strange joy. He glances from Rendon to the message, noting that Rendon seems blissfully unaware of the quest. Rendon raises an eyebrow. "Are you all right, Theo? You look like you're about to do something foolish." Oh, Theo's about to do exactly that. With his wooden sword forgotten and his fist trembling in pure, justified rage, Theo mutters under his breath, "If this is some kind of twisted joke from the gods, I'm not complaining." And with one swift motion, he slams his fist right into Rendon's face, thinking, dream or not, this is my chance to finally shut that smirk up. Theo's fist landed squarely on Rendon's face, and for a second, it felt like the whole world had paused. Even the nearby knights seemed stunned into silence. But to Theo's dismay, the punch didn't even seem to faze Rendon. Theo couldn't help but wonder, why does this dream feel so real if my punch is this wimpy? Rendon, calm as ever, swung his wooden sword forward and smacked Theo right in the shoulder, sending him flying straight into the dirt. As Theo groaned on the ground, Rendon shook his head like a disappointed parent. "I said the lesson was over, Theo." Theo winced, rubbing his shoulder. "Pain? In a dream? Seriously?" Rendon sighed, almost pityingly, saying he understood Theo's frustration, especially with the awakening ceremony fast approaching. But that's no excuse for a student to lash out at his master. Theo blinked in confusion. Awakening ceremony? What is he even talking about? Rendon's disappointment was palpable. He added that, as a Ragnar, Theo should have known better than to swing with his fist instead of his sword. With that, Rendon turned and walked away, leaving Theo lying in the dirt with a bunch of knights snickering nearby. The knights took the opportunity to pile on, laughing and calling him an imbecile. They taunted him, saying he was probably no Ragnar at all and that even an illegitimate child would have more skill. Theo sat there, touching his face, feeling the sting from Rendon's hit. He grabbed a handful of sand, still trying to convince himself it was all a dream. But the gritty texture and throbbing pain were all too real. This wasn't some flashback, this was real. He remembered the awakening ceremony was supposed to take place 10 years ago, which left him with one unsettling thought. Did I somehow just get thrown back in time? Just then, the system popped up with a congratulatory message. Tutorial quest number 1 completed. Theo's eyes widened. The system continued, announcing that he'd activated his Ragnar's talent. Now thoroughly confused, Theo stared at the system message until it prompted him with a question. Claim your reward? He hesitated, but then raised his hand to select yes. Instantly, a bright light surged from his body, and the system displayed his stats rocketing upward at lightning speed. All Theo could do was gape, trying to comprehend it all. What the hell is going on? Later, back at Rose Palace, Rendon was reporting on Theo's progress in a guest room. With a deadpan expression, he commented to his superiors that he'd never met anyone so utterly talentless. But then he added, with an air of self-importance, that this was precisely why he, Rendon Harvey, the true teacher, was there. Rendon swears he'll do his best to prepare Theo for the awakening ceremony, which is only 5 months away. Lady Cecilia Ragnar, the mistress of Rose Palace and Theo's mother, nods approvingly, trusting Theo's training to him. She hands over a pouch of gold coins, asking Rendon to give Theo some extra attention. "Oh, no need to worry about that, my lady," Rendon assures her with a slick smile. "I'll be training him day and night." Cecilia just raises an eyebrow, replying that it's not worry driving her, it's faith in Theo. Rendon tries to cover his surprise, nodding as he leaves the room. Once he's out, he mutters, "Oh, she'll be worried all right." He chuckles, knowing he's been doing anything but proper training, and doubting Theo will ever impress anyone, let alone awaken. He scoffs, thinking Cecilia and Theo are cut from the same cloth, a bloodline bound to disappoint. Honestly, it's a sweet setup for Rendon. Good pay, fancy title, and best of all, the chance to sabotage Theo's progress and leak info to a mysterious benefactor. This Ragnar imbecile is practically his golden ticket. As Rendon savors his bright future, he spots Theo sprinting toward him with a determined look. Rendon smirks, calling him an imbecile under his breath, but Theo just blows right past him. Left in the dust, Rendon glares after him, grumbling about idiotic losers. Meanwhile, Theo bursts into the guest room, his mother looking up in surprise. She gives him a gentle smile. You look tired from training, my dear. But instead of a response, Theo wraps her in a tight hug. She stammers, asking why he's acting like this. Theo, tears in his eyes, can't believe he's back. His last memory of her was, well, that's a nightmare he'll keep to himself. But for now, he's beyond relieved to see her alive and well. As she watches her son with a puzzled expression, Theo clings to his mother, vowing to himself, this time, I'll rewrite everything. Rendon, you're not getting away with anything. At that moment, the system pops up with his next quest. Train your body to the limit. Theo takes one last look at his mother and heads straight to the training ground, running laps like a man on a mission. He's got revenge on his mind, but reality checks in quick. With his current noodle arms, he's got a lot of work to do. Theo realizes his top priority is getting stronger. As he jogs, he recalls his old involvement with Black Word, the intelligence agency he'd joined in his last life. Back then, thanks to his lack of skill, they'd stuck him on the information team. Little did he know, the information he gathered would one day come in handy now. One key detail pops up in his mind. An elixir known as the Bloody Sword Emperor's elixir. It hadn't seemed important at the time, but it turns out it could boost strength when paired with rigorous training. Theo's eyebrows practically sparkle at the idea. This might be the shortcut he needs. He pushes on, hours passing by as he keeps running non-stop. As the sun starts to rise, Theo is still at it. No breaks. One of the knights training nearby spots Theo and, raising an eyebrow, asks how many laps he's clocked without resting. Must be on lap infinity, Theo thinks, feeling more invincible by the second. But he can only gasp a reply. He grabs a wooden sword, determined to keep going, swinging it over and over, all while keeping an eye on his progress in the system window. It's already up to 65%. Days blur together as Theo swings that sword like it's his only lifeline. Watching from the sidelines, Evelyn Naravel, the manager of Training Ground Number 4, can't help but squint at him with a mixture of disbelief and mild amusement. Puffing on a cigar, she yawns and mutters, is this really the so-called imbecile of Ragnar? Seeing how hard he's training, she's genuinely wondering if all the talk of his lack of talent might be a little exaggerated. Meanwhile, Theo is a complete wreck, panting so hard he thinks he might pass out. But he's at 97% and refuses to quit. He remembers just last night when he dared to take a break at 90%. To his horror, the progress actually dropped. This system has no chill, Theo thinks, forcing himself to keep going until his legs are jelly and his arms are barely functioning. Now, at 98%, Theo stumbles forward with his wooden sword, swinging it with the last bit of strength he's got. Theo could feel he was almost there. Just one more push, he thought, bounding around the training ground like he'd just had an extra strength espresso. The system progress bar ticked up to 99%, and he dug deep, convincing himself he just needed to reach that final percent. Watching from the sidelines, Evelyn couldn't believe her eyes. Her jaw practically hit the ground as Theo fought through the pain, looking like a delirious warrior on the edge of collapse. At last, he hit 100%. With that sweet number in his vision, he finally stopped, wobbling like a leaf in the wind. The system window lit up, congratulating him on completing tutorial quest number 2. It showed his rewards and bonuses, but Theo's vision was so blurred he could barely make out anything. Trembling, he collapsed to the ground. The system asked if he wanted to claim his rewards now. He blindly stretched out a shaking hand and clicked yes, and as soon as he did, he passed out cold. A radiant light surged into his body, sending a gust of air rippling through the training ground. Evelyn, still watching, had to shield her eyes. What in the world? She muttered wide-eyed. Later, Theo woke up, jolting upright when he realized he was no longer on the training ground. Evelyn entered, rolling her eyes at his look of shock. She explained that he was in the break room of Training Ground Number 4. Look, even a Ragnar's got to take it easy sometimes, she said with a half-smirk. Theo quickly thanked her, though he was still processing everything. As he sipped the water she handed him, Evelyn looked at him thoughtfully. Then, with a raised brow, she asked, Tell me, young master, you are aware of the Ragnar clan rule about opening your mana hall before the awakening ceremony, right? Theo froze mid-sip, nodding slowly, suddenly feeling like he'd been caught sneaking out after curfew. Evelyn's expression grew serious. And you know what happens if someone breaks that rule, correct? Theo blinked, still not sure why she was bringing it up, but Evelyn went on, her tone dropping ominously. because right before you lost consciousness, I detected a mana wave that only comes from the opening of a mana hall. Theo's mind spun. Wait, my mana hall? But I shouldn't have survived that. He thought, alarmed. But then he felt something new, a pulse within, and suddenly remembered the system notification. He had obtained a dragon heart as a reward. Not just any heart, mind you, a dragon heart. The kind that only exists in bedtime stories and physicians' worst nightmares. And as if that wasn't enough, as a bonus reward for his speedy quest completion, Theo also received 10 years' worth of magical power in one go. He was practically buzzing. Stunned and in disbelief, Theo thought, great. Now I'm a one-man freak show with enough mana to blow up a continent. Just as planned. The dragon heart, he recalled, was a big deal. Most warriors would trade their last pair of good boots for it. Because while dragons put their monohalls right in their hearts, making them a walking magic dynamo. Humans? Well, humans stuck theirs in their lower abdomens like awkward battery packs. Who needs dignity anyway? Theo muttered to himself. Humans simply couldn't handle the magic load in their chests. It was why every warrior, especially those glory hounds in the Ragnar clan, dreamed of a dragon heart. For them, it was the ultimate shortcut to glory. But until now, no one had been able to overcome their natural limits. Until Theo. A bold idea crossed his mind, and he had to stifle a chuckle. Enter Evelyn Nereval, high-ranked swordsman, commander of respect, and the only woman so intimidating she could make a demon dragon break a sweat. She'd even run training ground number for like it was a military fort. And, Theo recalled, she had a radar-like intolerance for dishonesty or cowardice. Wonderful, because if Evelyn sniffed out even a whiff of dragon heart in him, she'd haul him straight to the executioner herself, no questions asked. Theo let out a barely suppressed sigh. You had to be right here, didn't you, Evelyn? Still, he couldn't resist testing the waters. With a calm but serious tone, Theo looked at her and asked, Can you really handle the consequences of accusing me, the Ragnar heir, of breaking rules based on your hunch? He gave her his best you wouldn't dare look, watching as her eyes widened. Evelyn's composure wobbled. Good sign. Because if you're wrong, he added, his grin widening, you'll be defiling the Ragnar name. Our name. And the punishment for that crime is execution. She practically choked on the word. Theo nodded, giving her an approving look. Oh, good, glad you know the rules. So by all means, feel free to check. It's not like I've got anything to hide. Evelyn's face contorted, caught somewhere between rage and bewilderment. She didn't say a word, her gaze narrowing as she studied him. This has to be the most entertaining thing I've done all year, Theo thought, doing his best to keep his face innocent. Finally, with a heavy sigh, Evelyn released her power in a wave, determined to confirm his words. She approached, eyes blazing, and began searching his abdomen, expecting to find the telltale monohall. But when she looked, there was nothing. Confused, Evelyn's mind raced. Could I have made a mistake? Impossible. Theo, noticing her uncertainty, leaned in with a playful smile and asked, No monohall? His voice was casual, almost teasing, as if he were pointing out she'd missed a spot in her inspection. Realizing her blunder, Evelyn's face flushed. She immediately knelt, bowing her head low. Lord Theo, she exclaimed, I've wronged you. Please, execute me for my offense. Theo raised an eyebrow, amused. Execute? Well, that escalated quickly. He knew there'd be no monohall visible, because the beauty of a dragon heart's monohall was that it could be controlled and hidden at will by its user. And since nobody was expecting humans to possess dragon hearts for, a couple of centuries or so, Evelyn would never suspect the truth. Suppressing a laugh, Theo simply tapped her shoulder and said, No need for that, Evelyn. I think we're good here. Evelyn's jaw dropped, her fierce expression melting into utter bewilderment. As he turned to walk away, he called back, You only did what you believed was right. There aren't many people brave enough to call out a Ragnar heir on pure suspicion. Theo smirked as he watched her grapple with that. 1 point for Theo, he thought, admiring her sense of honor. Plus, it might come in handy someday to have Evelyn owe him a debt, so he wasn't about to refuse it lightly. As Evelyn continued staring at him in shocked silence, Theo leaned back against the doorway and said, By the way, they prohibit opening your mana hall before the official ceremony, because, well, it could overflow. He paused, a sly grin spreading across his face. But I find it funny you were worried about me. I mean me, the bastard of Ragnar, overflowing with too much mana. I'm honored. Evelyn stood there, dumbstruck, still clutching the unlit cigar between her fingers. A few days later, Theo was in the training grounds when Rendon barked at him, his voice sharp as a whip. Theo, your swing is all wrong. More to the right. How many times do I have to say it? Theo sighed inwardly. This is what I get for holding back. Sure, he could probably take down half the cavalry with a dragon's pinky claw, but convincing Rendon otherwise was proving exhausting. Theo glanced at Rendon, mentally calling him a bastard, and not in the noble sense. How long are we going to keep up this circus? It was clear that Rendon was teaching him deliberately flawed techniques, the way one might teach a kitten to hunt by batting at shadows. As Rendon stepped forward to adjust Theo's grip once again, Theo's suspicions hardened. There's someone pulling the strings here, he thought, and this guy's nothing but a cheap marionette. Then, an idea sparked, and Theo's lips curled into a sly smile. Hey, Rendon, he called out. Rendon spun around, eyes narrowing. Talking during lessons, huh? He snapped, his voice dripping with faux authority. Theo rolled his eyes, and, before Rendon could launch into a full lecture, snapped the wooden sword in his hands with an effortless twist. Sorry, but this lesson is total garbage, Theo said, dropping the pieces. His gaze cold. You know, Rendon, I can't help but wonder. How exactly did you reach the exalted rank of mid-rank swordsman with skills like these? Theo's tone was biting. I'd bet you'd struggle against even a low-ranked demonic beast. Tell me, did they hire you to play babysitter? Rendon's face flushed red, his hands shaking with barely contained fury. Would you like to repeat that? He managed, his voice low and dangerous. Oh, I'd love to, Theo replied smoothly, leaning in. Your skills are garbage. Rendon was visibly seething, yet Theo remained calm, watching him through narrowed eyes. Go ahead, he thought. Get so angry you'll have to call in your little puppet master. As Rendon stormed off, Theo barely resisted a smirk. Later, at Camellia Palace, a knight sprinted into the dining hall, nearly tripping over himself. Sir Action, he called out, breathless. Have you heard? The bastard of Ragnar is set to duel his instructor next week. Action Ragnar, one of the infamous four hounds of the north and known as the Dark Tiger, didn't look up. He simply grabbed his glass of wine, took a sip, and then, with casual disdain, threw it. The glass hit the knight square in the face, shattering on impact. The knight yelped in pain, collapsing to the floor. Do you honestly think I care? Action sneered, his voice dripping with disgust. If the so-called bastard of Ragnar gets himself half disabled, it'll save us all the trouble. Beside him, Remington Narcio, also known as the Silver Lion, simply watched the scene unfold with a bemused smirk. Half the fun of being a Ragnar, he thought to himself, is watching the inevitable explosions. At that moment, a figure entered the room with a calm, yet foreboding presence. Ed Troivit, known as the Sky Dragon, one of the 9 dragons and a respected elder of the Ragnar clan. He glanced at Action and spoke. You'd better care, Action. Action leaned back, rolling his eyes. With all due respect, Uncle, only people with talent are worth worrying about. Remington immediately straightened, giving Ed a respectful bow, while Action leaned forward, looking half bored, half annoyed. Why are you so worried about Theo anyway? Ed fixed him with a steely look. When it comes to the Ragnar clan, even the smallest chance can turn into something unprecedented. Sometimes, all it takes is a spark to create a wildfire. Action scoffed but reassured Ed, our little friend Rendon will take care of things. 1 week later, at training ground number 4, the stage was set. Knights gathered around, their murmurs rising as they took in the spectacle. Even Evelyn had shown up, accompanied by a few other important figures, to watch this duel unfold. Theo stood on the stage, gripping his sword, inwardly cursing. All I wanted was to humiliate Rendon and get him fired, but now this has turned into a full-blown showdown. The crowd roared as Theo and Rendon faced each other, swords gleaming in the morning sun. If I'm going down in this mess, I might as well make it entertaining, Theo thought, a sly grin creeping across his face. Suddenly, his system flashed a new tutorial quest. Fight Rendon and win. Oh, you're just as twisted as I am, he thought, amused. He remembered how it had all started. A week earlier, after Theo had torn into Rendon's swordsmanship and declared him fired, he had turned to leave. Rendon, barely holding back a scream, had demanded that Theo couldn't dismiss him so easily. I still have plenty of time left on my contract. Contract, you say? Theo had smirked, not even glancing back. As your employer, if I say you're fired, you're fired. Simple as that. He walked away, picturing Rendon's seething expression. In another life, I would have gladly pummeled him into the ground for all he's done. But he knew he wasn't quite ready to overpower him yet. No, first he needed time to investigate the strings being pulled behind Rendon. Rendon, on the other hand, saw his mission slipping from his grasp. He couldn't be fired now. If he was, his task would fail. Desperate, he had chased Theo, practically begging. Theo, you can't just let me go. It's against protocol. As Theo read the system's prompt announcing his third tutorial quest, Rendon was still hissing threats, warning that if he reported this firing to the tribunal, things could get very ugly for Theo. Before Theo could even respond, Evelyn appeared, her presence like a swift breeze cutting through the tension. I think I have an alternative, she said, her gaze settling on both men with a slight smirk. Theo felt a shiver run down his spine. We'll settle this the Ragnar way. Theo blinked, trying to read her face. Wait, you mean a duel? Precisely, she replied with a nod. The rule of the strong. No need for the tribunal. The victor decides. Rendon's eyes gleamed, and he agreed eagerly, almost vibrating with excitement. In his mind, the heavens had surely aligned in his favor. Evelyn continued, Then we'll set the duel for 1 week from now. Theo's stomach dropped, and he was sure he looked pale as a ghost. Evelyn, apparently noticing, gave him a polite smile. Does that sound fair, Theo? Theo's mind screamed absolutely not, but he couldn't seem to form the words. Rendon, meanwhile, was grinning at him with a smugness that only added insult to injury. 1 week? I'm barely warming up to my dragon heart, and this clown already thinks he's Ragnar's greatest gift. Later, in the corner of the training grounds, 2 knights stood chatting. One, a black-haired knight, whispered, Did you hear? They say Theo Ragnar can't even swing his sword straight yet. The brown-haired knight stared, dumbfounded. But he's still a Ragnar, right? Isn't that like in his blood? The black-haired knight chuckled. Theo's not your average Ragnar. He's the Ragnar cripple. No way he's beating a mid-rank swordsman like Rendon. Meanwhile, back on the stage, Rendon gazed at Theo with barely concealed amusement. Look, Theo, he said, feigning compassion, there's no need for you to risk your life over pride. Apologize, and I'll forget all about this. Theo took a slow, deliberate breath and returned Rendon's smirk. Actually, Rendon, I was going to tell you the same thing. If you don't want to lose an arm, you'd best accept that you're fired. The audacity of Theo's words made Rendon's jaw clench. This brat, Rendon fumed internally. I was going to show him some pity. Now, I'll finish him off, call it an accident, and everyone will think I did the clan a favor. With an insidious smile, Rendon motioned toward Theo. Go on, young master. I'm your teacher. After all, I'll graciously let you have the first move. Theo's grip tightened on his sword, the weight of the duel and the eyes of the crowd on him. If this is the Ragnar way, he thought, I'm about to show them a very different kind of Ragnar. With a steady breath, Theo dashed forward, his sword raised as he shouted. No hesitation. Rendon barely flinched, positioning himself and easily blocking Theo's attack. Their swords clashed with a resonant clang that echoed across the training grounds. The crowd of knights erupted, standing up in shock and murmuring in disbelief. Rendon was on the offensive now, his sword flashing skillfully in a deadly arc. The crowd roared with jeers, taunts rolling off their tongues as they watched Theo struggle. The imbecile can't even hold a sword properly, someone sneered. At this rate, he'll actually end up dead. Yet, to their surprise, Theo parried Rendon's attacks, his expression calm, even amused. What happened, Rendon? Theo mocked as he blocked another slash. Weren't you the mighty mid-rank swordsman? Rendon's face twisted with fury. Know your place, you worthless apprentice. You think you can look down on me? In his mind, the outcome was already settled. Theo, the Ragnar cripple, was little more than a pest to him. While Theo's skills had oddly improved over the last week, he was still far from being any kind of threat. If Theo were at the level of one of the 4 Hounds of the North, perhaps then he'd have a chance. But there was no way this weakling could defeat him. But Theo's calmness wasn't just for show. His mind flashed back to an earlier conversation with Evelyn in her office. He had asked why she had pushed him into this duel in the first place, half expecting her to dodge the question. But Evelyn had answered frankly, explaining that if he wanted to get rid of Rendon permanently, he needed to do it thoroughly. She had taken a sip of her tea, then continued, I suspect Rendon has someone backing him. Simply firing him won't be enough to eliminate the threat. Theo had blinked, surprised. How did you know? Evelyn had revealed that she'd been quietly investigating Rendon. She'd noticed the absurdity of his teaching methods weeks before, when she saw him instruct Theo to angle his sword in such an exaggerated, bizarre way. Curious, she had someone look into Rendon's background, which quickly revealed a suspicious connection to the Camellia Palace. To tell the truth, I wondered where this son of a bitch came from, she muttered, her eyes narrowing. No competent swordsman would teach such nonsense. And all the trails lead back to Camellia Palace. That revelation had hit Theo like a lightning strike. In his previous life, he'd never learned this. The recent incident with his dragon heart must have piqued her interest enough to look deeper. Theo's anger simmered beneath the surface, directed at the shadowy politics surrounding the throne. This conspiracy that had reached even his training ground made his blood boil. But he quickly composed himself, acknowledging how impressive it was that Evelyn had uncovered so much. Despite his frustration, he admitted, I'm still not strong enough to take Rendon down. What's your plan now? Evelyn's response had been both surprising and resolute. You're underestimating yourself, Theo. You can beat him. Back in the present, Rendon strutted toward Theo with a sneer, taunting him. Kneel and beg for forgiveness now, and maybe, just maybe, I'll spare you. With that, video end here. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Want the next part? Drop a next in the comments. Thanks for sticking around, and see you in the next video.